Lisa, you've been looking at our willingness to be out in the world, embrace pre-pandemic life again. It seems like timing's important here. When was this survey taken?
This survey was actually taken at the late February, so it is a couple of weeks old. So we will want to make sure that we keep that in perspective.
Yeah, because things have seemed to improve even more since then, but this is a snapshot. And let's start with Democrats, if we could. They usually live in areas with more vaccinations, lower death rates, but you found they're more fond of things like masking.
Right. And so, as you know, we've been tracking this since the very beginning, and we're talking about how do the consumers fall into, I'm ready to go back out there, or I'm still a little bit anxious. And so what we're finding is, given that situation, those that tend to lean a little bit more to the Democrats, the willingness or the desire to still wear masks, and they're a little bit more worried about the lack of safety protocols. So the folks that have lived under those real constraints are still anxious to get back out into living their normal lives.
You talked about protocols, which I would imagine for any business owner, restaurateur, they'd say, I don't care if you wear a mask or don't wear a mask. I just need your money, come in my business, sit down, order something good. But, you know, people might not get through that door if they're worried about safety protocols. And it turns out a lot of Democrats say they think maybe people got too lax too fast.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting is, you know, I've always talked about lead with joy, reassure with safety. And there are about 21% that lean to Democrat that are still very anxious. And in order for those consumers to step back into, you know, retail, to restaurants, to movies, we still need to assure people that safety protocols are in place. And it's over 70% of Democrats today actually really are concerned that the lack of safety protocols have just gone by the wayside.
And the top line on the Republican side is time to get back to normal life.
Right. And I think that data may not surprise is that, so yes, on the other side of the aisle are the main things that are really differentiating among Republicans are, yes, it's actually just time to get back to living, and also a little bit lack of trust in science and the news and all of that, and really just making their own choices. But I think what's interesting that we have to remember, you know, and this is honestly right at the 2-year mark of when COVID began, and a lot of the language, shutdowns, lockdowns, isolations, quarantine, those are very scary words, and that we're just seeing that a lot of consumers are still kind of, you know, in their own minds locked down for that fear right now.
Beyond the lost institutional trust, which you talk about in Republicans, news media, medical establishment, it's not just being burned out by COVID. You found it was 60% of them say they're burned out by news about COVID, to where they're almost tuning it out at this point. And you need the public informed on something like this, but they're tuning it out.
Right. And that is, it's, you know, again, if you think about just time and time again, especially in the early days, you know, every day we were hearing about it. But yeah, the trust in the news is something, you know, people are burned out by that and they're tuning it out. And it just, you know, how do we get back to those joyful activities, re-entering the, you know, our normal activities again? And it's just a very stark, it's an unfortunate difference. And I think the other thing that's unfortunate, unintended consequences, is that in the communities that actually had the most strict of the mandates and so on, from a business perspective, when you look at restaurant sales, their economic recovery has been dramatically slower than those that had less strict mandates.
Lisa Miller,
yes.
As always, thanks. We'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.